You guys got to be nice, though. Jake, thank you so much.
Fellas?
For my audience, this is Jake Rattlesnake. Met you through, this is the first time we met in person, but met you through the Crucible and Andrew Wilson. Saw you hosting debates, reviewing debate content. Loved it. Andrew recommended that we talk. Thank you so much for joining me in my 24-hour live stream. We're on like hour, I don't even know. I can't count this high. We're on, we got 7 hours. So like 17, we're on hour 17 here. So thanks so much for joining us.
No, it's my pleasure, dude. I think the longest I've ever gone is about 8 or 9 hours on the whatever podcast. And by the end of it, I'm just totally brain fried. So I had to come and lend my support and force my way onto this stream by invading the chat.
I'll take it. So these are, I used to have a radio show, and these were my two co-hosts. This is Carlos Saldivi up on the top left here, and this is Todd. He's a political consultant. He claims to be retired, but it's bullshit. Todd Bartley at the bottom, who's a journalist. One of the best journalists I've met. So it's great for all you guys to be in a room. I think we'll have a good discussion here.
Yeah,
well,
dude,
welcome to the King of Australia, which is
that's
how Andrew defined you.
Yeah.
That's what I like to be referred to as now. I appreciate that. Thanks, fellas.
Hey,
I've been watching. Go on.
As a journalist, I got a question for you first, Jake. How in the world did you get the last name Rattlesnake? We need to know the backstory on this.
Well, actually, it's Lord Jake Rattlesnake because I was recently given a plot of land in Scotland for my most recent birthday.
Really?
For my 29th birthday.
Outstanding. By the way, if you couldn't tell from the face and the hair, my people are from your neck of the woods there in Scotland, so that's good stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm actually not from Scotland, but I've commandeered some land.
No, you got some land, brother. So
you're
you're from there now. I mean,
That's
you're gonna.
right.
We can talk about residency and domicile later, but if you got land in Scotland, that's awesome.
Yeah. So those are my people now, up in the Highlands there. I'm pretty happy about it. But yeah, I'm a lord now. So I don't know. Can I put it on my passport?
I think so.
Awesome.
Right?
I don't see why not. We were just talking about people saying stuff that never even happened. I mean, at least you can say, I've got a plot of land in Scotland. That's actually for real in a lordship.
What do you need a passport? If you're coming to the United States, you don't need a passport. Just pronounce your love and unadulterating fealty to the Democratic Party. They'll let anyone in. They don't give a shit.
They'll show you an app. They give you a free phone. They'll put you on a plane. You go cross country. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently I can just come across the southern border. I'm actually in the process at the moment of trying to get a visa, like a working visa. It's not easy. There's so much bureaucracy. It costs so much money. But apparently if you just go across the southern border, it's all good. You can just waltz on in. Me and Andrew spoke to a Russian girl on the whatever podcast who literally just got into Mexico and walked across the border with all of her luggage. And yeah,
Works out.
She had anal WHORE tattooed on her arm there. So I don't know, maybe that could work. I could do that.
A classy lady. Yeah. Like, God, I don't know how you guys look, I couldn't do the whatever. It's not really my shtick, but man, do I appreciate how you guys could try to deal with these people. I mean, that woman probably will have a kid someday. I'm assuming with her.
She has a kid.
Yeah. Can you imagine that?
Kid.
Can you
Yeah.
Can you imagine that kid? That poor kid, man. Man, you feel so bad for those.
So what you're saying is, Jake, it's happened. We can confirm it's happened at least once.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has happened. Unfortunately, she's made a spawn. So yeah, I mean, we need more of them apparently. So it's all right. But Rob, I saw you. I've been watching you recently, absolutely eviscerating some lefties, and I must just say that I have been a big fan of your work recently. The slam poet that you debated the other day was one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen in my life. I was watching it live, and I was almost crying with tears of joy with your reaction. And then today I reviewed it on my live stream, and I started zooming in on his little face as you started insulting him, and as you started going into your slam poetry. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. His face just went from I really just did something to just crushed.
Yeah, I saw Andrew reviewing it a little. I was at work, and I was telling Andrew this earlier. Like, it was the first time I saw his face, and it really does shock me that you could see in his face, like, oh shit, I thought I just did something. Like, he literally thought with that poem, it was like, man, this is gonna blow them away. And then, the poor guy that's his partner, like, he tried to put a strong face up, and he's not a strong debater anyways, but can you imagine if that dude's your partner and you're like, holy shit, what is this guy doing? For those that missed it, I don't know what to say other than this dude for 8.5 minutes read a poem about the evils of Donald Trump. Like, if I could do an impression, it'd be something like this. And lo, they found that need not they listen, for they had cutten their ears so that they could not hear. And you're like, What the fuck? Meanwhile, my opening statement was, listen, these guys ain't going to talk about policy. All they're going to do is bitch about Donald Trump and his personality and stuff like that. And then the dude proves my point in the most spectacular possible way.
But you know what was so funny about it? I was watching it, and I was watching the whole Orange Man bad sort of meme come to fruition. Like, it was like the whole arc had happened, and there was someone in front of my face who was doing an Orange Man bad slam poetry, and I was like, this has to be a parody. It reminded me, have you guys ever seen 21 Jump Street when he does the slam poetry? He's like, Julia Roberts, Julia Roberts. It reminded me so much of that. I couldn't believe it wasn't a parody, but it's just like, this is actual TDS brain rot.
I think one of the most underrated, hilarious lines I ever heard is when the moderator's like, and time. And he says, well, I had more, but I guess I'll stop. It took everything I had not to piss myself laughing. Like, holy shit, this guy would have went on for hours. Like, he was ready, man. And apparently
the best part was when he said, you broke him, Rob. I think you broke him.
Yeah, apparently people were telling me, like, on his chat, he put the whole poem up so that people could read it for themselves. And he then, like, I don't normally follow this sort of shit, but I couldn't help but notice, someone pointed it to me. My editor put that video up in, like, little portions, and he commented. That dude came on to my video to comment, and he was still butthurt about it. He's like, listen, people are upset at me because I took a chance and did something different. But, Rob lies about crime stats. And it's like, one, you were wrong about crime stats. But second, you're still, like, take your L and your shame and just crawl away.
Hold it.
Change your damn name, your alias that you're going by, grow a mustache or some shit, and pretend that never happened, because there is no coming back from the cringe of that level. And to act like that, like somehow, like, well, I was just taking a chance. You wasted everyone's time except for the humor value that you provided. But hey, man, bring on these lefties. That's the best thing. It's either that or you get the spurging out people like Destiny, whatever, dime a dozen, Go ahead, Todd. You get some.
Is it true, the guy that you were debating about the poem, was he reading from Liz's diary?
I have no clue. It could definitely be but now, Liz, who are you talking about specifically? Liz? You mean
Liz Cheney?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought you meant Ashley Biden's diary. I thought maybe her middle name was Liz. I was like, no, that shit's not terms of service friendly. Talking about what Joe Biden did to his daughter. Yeah, Liz. I don't know.
Can you just see her sitting by the nightlight? Just. Oh, thee, this thou. Oh, George, if you'd finally jump in the deep end of the pool and endorse Kamala.
Oh, January 6th.
Go down with the Titanic with me. I mean, come on. We're all in this together.
It is absolute insanity, the people we deal with. Let me ask you this, Jake. As someone coming from across the pond, what's the impression of Donald Trump over there? Like, what do people feel in general?
Well, one of my favorite things to do is to have dialogues sometimes, though, because it's so tiring, with people from Australia about Donald Trump and watch the reactions, because people absolutely hate him over there. Because Australia, you have to understand with Australia, is that we don't really have the Christian core that America has, that I think is where the sort of conservatives, the big conservative bases are in those sort of red states where they're kind of based. In Australia, we don't really have that. Like, our population is pretty much concentrated in the big cities, and then we just have a massive desert in the middle. You might get some base people out bush, but yeah, people really hate him because the sort of media caricature that they've painted of him is just the way that they see him. And the media in Australia is unbelievably liberal. So I love to just sort of ask people what they think about Donald Trump sometimes and watch them implode and say, I actually really like Donald Trump. I had a really, really funny one where there was this feminist at like a lunch that I was at, and she goes to me, "You're not one of those Trump supporters, are you?" And I said, "Yeah, no, I actually am. I really love Donald Trump." And then she started losing it at me, saying, "How can you like him? He's a racist, misogynist pig." And I was like, "Hey, listen, I'm happy to have this dialogue with you, but you're getting a little bit emotional here. And if you ever say that to a feminist, it's just lights out." And she just lost it. But yeah, that's pretty much the way it goes. I lived in London for 3 years as well, in the belly of the beast in terms of wokeness. And recently I've been putting a few Trump things on my Instagram. I don't really normally post political stuff on my Instagram. And I had a bunch of people who I used to know who were real, like, sort of wokey, non-binary types, all messaging me about it and commenting on my photos and everything. And so I've made a few phone calls recently just for a bit of fun. But yeah, just they despise him.
It's real. You know, some of the clips that I see from like little snippets of you'll see of some of the media performances on Australia is amongst the most insane shit. I remember, like, just off the top of my head, I remember watching this clip of someone on like some morning show or something in Australia. This fucking lady explaining how if you're changing your baby's diaper, you have to ask for permission. Otherwise, it's like tantamount to some your child hasn't given you consent. And I'm like, they're like literally approaching this like the host of this show like this is a real argument, and you're just waiting. Like, my impression of Australia, and I'm sure this isn't fair to you, but my impression of Australia will always be one of my favorite movies, which is Crocodile Dundee. So I'm just waiting for like a man's man to come in and be like, what the fuck are you taught? What is happening here? Like, and it's just, nope, it's not there. It just continues to go, you know?
That person may have just walked in the background of Jake's screen.
I saw that.
I
saw it.
Yeah. That's my brother. That's my brother, producer. Maybe he wants to come and join in. No, he's shirtless. He's got his girlfriend around, hasn't he? So
we got to keep it TOS friendly here. But yeah, it's like
no, but Australia. The problem is the biggest problem with Australia, unfortunately, is the apathy because it drew. I don't know if you saw that thing that happened in 2020. You know, people got the sniffles. Australia was the most authoritarian place in the world. I mean, besides Cambodia, people don't really hear about this. But I went to Cambodia. And I was asking them about what it was like, and the king just clamped down and said, "Everyone, you're going to jail if you don't stay in your houses." But you know, we don't really hear about Cambodia. Right. But anyways, the problem with Australia is just pure apathy because we've always just had it so good in Australia. We didn't really get hit by the GFC in 2008. We haven't had any major wars on home turf since maybe the Japanese bombed us. It bombed the port of Darwin, but no one really knows about that, cares about it. The Vietnam veterans, who are all like sort of much more, the Vietnam veterans have a much better grasp of what it means to be Australian and Australian pride, etc. But otherwise, it's just pure apathy because things are just so good in Australia. But it might not last that long. Like my brother and I were at a funeral a few years ago of a Vietnam vet, and it was just like they were all doing the Australian songs, and there was this camaraderie. And then you look around now in Australia, and it's like there's no sense of identity anymore. So maybe one day I'll go back and be prime minister.
It's crazy. You see the same problems in the UK, right? And you're seeing problems in Canada where you have these countries that strong men have made good times, like the saying goes. And then when the times get good, it's like people are so, you can understand it. I understand people wanting to have a big heart and being open. That I understand. But you have to remember there's a reason that national identity matters and that people ended up in the countries that they're at, and they're a collective of people that have a shared set of cultural values. When you give that open and you're just like, no, we'll accept everything, things are going to fill that void. And the people that are filling that void aren't going to be as open and generous about your beliefs as you are there. Who is it? There's Frank Herbert, that wrote Dune, right? One of his famous quotes is, when you're in power, I ask for freedom because it's adherent to your principles. When I'm in power, I take away your freedom because it's adherent to my principles. And that's exactly what I think you're seeing in all of these sort of first world Western countries, where people have had it so good for so long that their generosity and openness have made them weak. And by the time they wake up, it's too late. All of a sudden you're seeing the shit like we see with like the grooming gangs when it comes to the UK, or we had guest on earlier that's talking about the insane shit that's going on in Canada. And I think Australia, sadly, over the sniffles, like I remember seeing these videos that blew my mind. They're like bragging like, oh, look at these camps that we've built. They're actually not that bad. Look, we have flower pots outside. And I'm just sitting there like slack-jawed like, what the fuck? Like people aren't rising up. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that was how I got my in with activism in terms of political activism, because before that I didn't care. I was like a liberal atheist Kuma, and then that whole thing happened in Australia, and I started going around to the marches, and there was big protests of people calling those that weren't conforming with this. They were calling them fascists, and they were doing counter protests to the fascists. And so I was going around and interviewing them, and I was like, hey guys, what does it mean to be a fascist? Can you tell me why these people are fascists? And obviously nobody had an answer for it. And we were doing these like global freedom rallies where we were getting people from all around the world with their expertise. But in Australia, people were cheering those camps on. Like if they honestly lined them up and said, hey guys, we're just going to get rid of all these anti-vaxxers, a lot of the Australian public would have honestly cheered it on. Like they had riot squads coming in and like using really like brutal force to beat the shit out of these people who weren't complying with the lockdowns and were just going out on the streets. So it's a real problem. And the UK, I mean, The UK, I think, is in a much where they're much further down the path. Like the dilemma, the feminist dilemma in the UK, or the liberal dilemma, if really in the UK, of being tolerant at all costs, but then allowing mass migration of people who are like the least most tolerant to your views that you can possibly imagine, is it's almost staggering to think that these people hold this sort of cognitive dissonance over there.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And one of the things about that, I'm sure I can't speak for Australia, but I bet it's the same, because although I don't think it was as drastic in many places in the United States, what you see is the rewriting of history. So when you bring up, do you see the animals you became? You accused us of being fascist for not wanting to be locked down through government authoritarianism. Like, how can you live with yourself? And they're like, that never happened. It's time to forgive and forget. We just need to move on. We were all doing the best we could. And it's that level of bullshit where you can see there's not going to be any accountability. The people that did that, they'll move right on to the next absolute certain belief that they need to totally control your life, and you're going to be a fascist and a monster, whatever the next issue is, climate change or terrorism or whatever it is, free speech, disinformation being bad. It doesn't matter. They'll just move right on to the next cause. Where, for people like me, I might be wrong. There are things that I've been wrong about, certainly, but I'm not saying that the government should put their boot on your throat so that you have to adhere to my beliefs. And they'll never apologize for that, because they always assume I'm the moral person. I know what I'm doing, and those that disagreed are immoral, and so it's okay. If I make mistakes, it's okay.
Yeah, no, Australia is honestly a pretty shocking case of this, but this is why I like American politics, because people kind of have a bit more skin in the game in America. In Australia, we went through a period where we had like 6 different prime ministers in the space of 2 years. It was just this sort of house of cards going on. But in America, they actually care a lot more about politics, and that is absolutely ground zero of the fight, because everything that happens in America, culturally and politically, Australia tends to be sort of downstream of that. And I just like how much more engaged people are. Like, there isn't much of a scene in Australia for people who are alternative voices, who actually have a platform and that people listen to, because no one really cares about politics that much. But in America, it's very different. People really sort of live and breathe it. And I love that, because I think that in a sense, we kind of have a duty to be somewhat involved.
No, I completely agree. Go ahead, Carlos. I'll be right back.
I don't really know a lot about Australia in terms of the government. We have an advantage here in the United States because we have the Constitution to protect our rights. Can you and we had guests on earlier, and there are YouTubers, and the name of their channel was Nat and the Guy. So he's Canadian, she's from Mexico, she went to Canada to study, and I guess they got married, but because of the conditions that are going on in Canada, they moved back to Mexico City, where they are now. So I asked them about, what is freedom of speech look like in Canada? And he drew us a really bleak picture. There's really no way. There's no tools for the people to fight back. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like in Australia?
Yeah, so we don't have freedom of speech. We don't have that enshrined in our constitution in Australia, and people can be held liable for all sorts of speech in Australia, whereas in America it's actually very protected. And in the UK we have a similar sort of like parliamentary system. There's been thousands of people arrested every year over the last few years for speech, for making Facebook posts. And in Australia, especially during the 2020 time, it was the exact same, where people were going to prison. There was all of these videos of these pregnant women being arrested, having the police come into their house for making a Facebook comment or a Facebook post. And also Australia is very much a testing ground. I'm not sure if you guys are very, very sort of in the know about all of the WEF stuff, the World Economic Forum, and all of their sort of dystopian plans. But Australia is kind of a testing ground for that, for all of these sort of digital smart cities and digital passports and online IDs. And I think that, to be honest, it's the apathy that's the big problem, because people don't really have a necessity to fight back against it, because why would you when you earn really good wages and we've got such good natural resources, our economy is always booming. They don't see the slippery slope. They just think that things are so good and they just trust government so much. Whereas obviously in America, you guys are always perpetually skeptical of government, which is a very positive thing.
Well, you stole the land. Go ahead.
Jake, what's the charge? What do they charge these people with when they come into their homes for Facebook posts or these women that were pregnant and, talking online?
I'm
Do
not
you have
100%
any
sure.
idea?
I'm not 100% sure what the charge is exactly, but I remember during that time it was more of a mandate. There wasn't like exactly a law against it, but the government had mandated this and mandated that, so that people were getting in trouble for this. But it was kind of like this blurry area where it's like you can go to jail for it, but it's not necessarily illegal. It's like a mandate. I remember one time I was just sitting outside in beautiful sunny Brisbane, and there was no one for hundreds of meters around me. I was just reading a book in a park, and it was the most Orwellian thing I've ever seen in my life. These cops came up on their little buggy, and they were just patrolling to see if anybody was on the street. And they came up to me and they're like, "Hey, mate, yeah, you need to go home." And I was like, "Brother, there's no one around me for hundreds of meters. I'm sitting in a park reading a book. Like, can we use some common sense here?" And they were like, "Yeah, sorry, buddy. Like, we don't want to do it, but it's the mandate." And I said, "But why don't you grow some balls, man?" Like, yeah. But it was shocking time.
That's unbelievable.
Who's it? Jordan Peterson talks about this. The book, I think it's called Ordinary People. I don't know if you've ever heard of Ordinary Men, right? And it's about sort of these Polish police force that, just to be as quick as possible, this is Polish police force that sort of, when the Nazis took over, they sort of went along with them, and basically they weren't bad dudes. They were ordinary men, and what ended up happening was they started off really sympathizing with the Jewish people, etc. And then by the end of it, they're taking Jewish ladies out in the field that are pregnant and shooting them in the back of the head. And incrementally, they were led down this path. And when they were asked, like, why did you do it? The number one reason they gave was, I didn't want my friends to have to do it. Someone had to do it. We were ordered to do it. And I didn't want it on their conscience, so I did it. So they make it an act of altruism. It was an act of sacrifice on their part. And I think you see that with law enforcement in a lot of these countries. Like you're suggesting there, Australia. I know we've seen it in the United States, where you'll see people that are like, yeah, police officers are like, yeah, we really don't want to enforce this. And here it was stupid shit like, you saw in California where Newsom was sending the police to beaches. You'd see a surfer and someone's filming from their window and the surfer running from like cops that are chasing him down. Like all this insane shit. And I'm sure if you talk to those people, they're human beings. I'm sure they'd tell you, well, shit, we didn't want to do it. We got better shit to do, but what can we do? That's what we were told to do. And what you realize is by the end of it, you end up like you're seeing at the UK. They're kicking in grandma's doors because some dank meme she put on Facebook or some shit. Meanwhile, you have grooming gangs that are just doing the most heinous shit possible that people are like, well, we don't want to be offensive. We don't want to speak up. Instead, we'll go after, someone like Tommy Robinson because, he's a bad guy. He has foul language. So we have more hatred for them. And it's so amazing to me, particularly when I look at the UK. Like, what has been confirmed in the UK is, for decades, tens of thousands of girls were groomed in the most heinous ways you can imagine. And the police knew about it, and the local politicians knew about it. And none of them have been held to account. But you couldn't get the British people to rise up in anger over that. Instead, though, they'll flip their shit when Tommy Robinson has a rally to complain about that.
The British government is serious about this. Like, I interviewed Tommy earlier on in the year. I went to London and I set up a studio and we did like a chat. And I have a podcast channel. And after those riots happened, they demonetized my whole channel because I had that interview. But just on the point of Ordinary Men, one of the fascinating things about that book is that they were never really forced to do anything or coerced to do anything as well. Is that like at every step along the way, they sort of said, okay, guys, well, you don't really have to go along with this, but they went along with it anyway. And they were just ordinary men. So it's like Hannah Arendt's The Banality of Evil. It's another interesting case study when it comes to sort of totalitarianism. And it's just like, people don't really understand that. You think that it's going to be these sort of like armies with their black boots walking through, but actually it's very banal. And you've got people who are sort of writing the forms for the trains and sort of loading up the trains and doing all of the bureaucracy and everything, and all of these sort of politicians with glasses. And it is very sort of banal if you look at it sort of on the micro level. But if you can take a step back and actually look at what's really happening, it's such a slippery slope.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, like you said, I do think that there's something unique about the United States. And I think that's one of the reasons that we see such an attack on the concept of like national identity in the United States. Because to me, it's sort of the last bastion against what I consider to be like this sort of globalist agenda, where they want to erode national boundaries and sort of have, Yeah, it's not even like people in smoky rooms drinking blood out of skulls. That's not what I'm saying. They understand for business and for leadership purposes and for control purposes that if there wasn't this problem of all of these national identities and people that have pride in their unique cultures, if we are all monolithic, then it's far easier to control that. There's only one set of rules that you have to go. And so it's going to be a return to neo-feudalism where you'll have the haves, you'll have the Bill Gates, you'll have the political leaders in countries, and they'll be the decision makers, and they live on the shiny buildings on the hill. And then there's the have-nots, and they'll give us bread and circuses. They'll keep us alive as long as we're remotely useful, as long as we promise not to be critical of them. And I think that the United States stands as sort of the last bastion, particularly like the middle class, small business owners, the working class, sort of the American dream where you could work yourself in to being someone that was very successful, and you have like and love and adherence to what it meant to be a United States citizen and the founding fathers and our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. That's why it's being eroded by every single policy. That's why the borders are open. That's why the concept of nationalism is being attacked. That's why it's considered racist to say, make America great again. All of this is an attack on national identity because they realize once this domino falls, that's it. There's nowhere else where you could point to that has what we've enshrined in our foundational documents, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, that will be able to stand up against the attack that they're levying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely of the mindset that America is not only ground zero, like I said before, of the discussion and the debate, but also America is the last bastion. It really is the city on the hill when it comes to this sort of thing. And coming from Australia, great country, thriving country, and also living in the UK, I fully see that, and I understand why Americans fight for it so much. But fellas, I've actually got to dip out. I've got to head to bed. But I really appreciate you having me on, Rob, and it was great to meet both of you guys as well. And if you want to come and jump on stream Monday, if you're free, Rob, then just message me.
I will talk to the wife. Thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate it. We'll be happy. Hopefully, I can do it Monday. If not, we'll talk soon. Go ahead, Todd. Todd's muted. The classic boomer Todd. Dad joke Todd muted.
Sorry. Final question, Jake. What do you plan to do with the land in Scotland? What are you going to develop on there? Are you going to put a house on there? What are you going to do?
It's about this big. It's only so I can be a lord. So I don't know. I'm probably going to visit it one day. Might plant a tree.
Vertical space, baby. As long as you build vertically, it doesn't matter how horizontal.
There's a guy he's a heck of a real estate developer. And it's vertical real estate. He could probably help you out there. I mean, because he builds
I'll build one of those Saudi Arabian cities, hey?
Yeah, there you go.
That's right.
Exactly.
Where can we find you online, Jake?
Rattlesnake TV on YouTube and Jake Rattle SNK on Twitter and Instagram.
All right, man.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much, Jake. We appreciate it, man. We'll talk soon.
Great meeting you, Jake.
Thanks for calling, man.